good to go.
I like it when we have some space to spread out over here.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Design Review Board for the City of Milton. May I ask all of you to join us in a call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Man, we have a full house tonight. Okay. I'd like to start off the meetings with an introduction to the board members, and we'll start off from my left over here. Rich.
Good evening. My name is Rich Johnson. I live in the Crabapple area.
I'm Tim Bryan. I have a business in Crabapple.
I'm Laura Weissong, and I live in Crooked Creek.
I'm Marty Littleton. I live on Freemanville Road.
Tony Shepard. I live in Nettlebrook Farms.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the approval of the agenda?
Motion.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second the motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good to go. Can I have a motion for approval of the February action minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the February action minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good to go. We are moving along fast. First, we have up 5 here under demolition reviews. We have 15670 Thompson Road. Mr. Howard Carson.
Yeah, my name is Howard Carson, 3082 East Chatillon Avenue, Atlanta. I recently bought a piece of land on Thompson Road. That piece of land had 3 ramshackle old barns and 1 little apartment on it that are about to fall in. Those need to be torn down quickly, and I intend to remove them. Obviously, I'm going to develop the property at some point in the future. As you can see from those pictures, they are literally in bad shape, to the extent of being a hazard.
I know that property well. I don't disagree.
What's that?
I don't disagree. I don't think they're falling down, but I think they have no redeeming value.
None. They were built in the late 80s. There's nothing significant about any of them.
Good. I happen to know the property pretty well. Other than a lot of wood and some nice stonework, there's not much there.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, normally the board would just ask the applicant what his intended future use may be, whether it be several houses or 1 house or joining up with another piece of property, just to keep it consistent.
Right. One of the things that we have done is we've asked in the past, before we give our demolition, a positive statement for demolition reviews. How do you intend to develop property, do you know?
I don't know yet. Still thinking about it. Obviously, it will be developed into a 1,200 unit apartment complex. That's just a joke. Obviously, it'll be some residential deal, septic tank lots.
Well, we have people that haven't even heard this. They're now choking, so that might not work. But in reality, if anybody have any questions?
It's a single family, it'll be a high-end single family subdivision.
Okay.
Is that all the structures on the property? It looks like there's one up there.
That's all that's left. The owner took there was a Quonset hut style building that Councilman Lusk came over and took down, and the guy that sold me the property took to Alabama with him. So that's all that's on the property that's left.
Are you tearing down the barn to the left as well?
Yes, everything that's standing, everything that's a liability to me, I want down. Yes.
Okay.
It looks like there's a structure on Hamby Road as well. Is that part of this?
There's nothing on the Hamby Road side of the property, no. There used to
Wasn't
be,
that tractor trailer trucks back there?
There were a couple of tractor trailers parked over there, and that may be what you're seeing on the area photo.
Are you
those are gone.
removing those? Or
those are already gone. Ralph took those with him.
He did. There was one tractor trailer on the front part of the property over by the barn / before you get to where his little apartment was.
There's one left, and that'll get hauled out when we tear all the buildings down.
Okay. What about all septic tanks?
Everything's going to get dug up, taken out, removed.
Okay. Well, I've seen you've already started your core sampling.
We have all the septic tank work's been done, all the soil work's been done. We're in the kind of planning process now.
There is, the backside on the Hamby side is the lower side of this piece of property. I don't really know how much of it's in the floodplain, but a good bit of it is, I would suspect. You know, I can't honestly say that I've actually driven to the backside of the property. I have seen it from the road on the other side. It's a pretty piece of property. It can be developed out to be a nice place.
It will be beautiful when I get through it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if you take a motion, I will motion to approve agenda item 5A as submitted.
It's just a review, I think. Do we?
No.
No, we have to approve it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank y'all.
Howard, go in peace. Okay. Next one, we have final reviews. First one coming up would be 663 Green Crest Lane, Deerfield Green, units 394 and 408. I've seen you before.
Yes. Sir? I've already given it down. Okay. Seth Brown with Lennar, 1000 Holcomb Woods Parkway. Here again for Deerfield Green. This is the last two buildings in the last pod. So what you're seeing there is all of the same changes that we incorporated for the last pod of buildings. So the windows, the board and bat on the ends, the new columns on the front porch, some wood radiuses over the windows that used to have some brick arches. So.
Mr. Chair, this would be consistent with what the board directed the Deerfield Green applicant to do for the balance of these units.
Okay.
So this, if I'm correct, this does represent the last of all the units that are in the development.
Correct.
Yeah, I have one recommended change, well, a couple of changes actually for units 394 through 408. 406 and 404 look very similar in color, so I did some moving around. So on 404, I would suggest the Shellman Bluff color. On 398, change that to Sedgefield, and 396, change that to Cypress Cove.
Did you get it? You got it?
All right, so 404 Shellman's Bluff
Yep,
and 398 Sedgefield.
yep.
And what was the last one?
And 396 would be Cypress Cove.
We don't have any changes for 376 to 390, is that correct?
Well, we're actually, so they're mislabeled on here.
Okay.
She's six, we're actually, I think you are talking, I don't know which ones you're,
She's actually already on 6,
Oh,
on
I'm
B.
sorry.
On which one?
She's on 6B is where her recommendations are, which is
My fault.
why I brought it up. So
Okay.
we can go ahead and make a motion on 6A
Yeah.
if there's no changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to make the
So
motion?
just so we're clear, 6A on our packet is technically 6B on the agenda.
You are absolutely correct.
That's what I'm trying to clarify. Doesn't,
We got them backwards.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is instead of voting on whether they're A or B, I'm going to do it based on the numbers numerically, okay?
Can I
So,
just, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of questions. Being that this is the last of the units, can the applicant just explain the status of the road paving, if that's been done, and the removal of the trailer when these units get constructed?
is there not a process to where on, the top-off is done and it's part of roads, when they turn it over, right? So they don't turn it over till they're complete. And so they have to go through an inspection
Sometimes they do it
process.
earlier. I was just wondering when they were planning on doing it, if they haven't done it already. And just the removal of the trailer or any signage or anything like that.
The trailer will come out before we start the last building because it's right in the middle of the pad. So
Okay,
In regards to the topping, about half of the community has already been topped final. I'll have to check on the other half and what the status was in regards to that, but whatever we still owe, generally we would come in right after we finish the last couple of large deliveries on construction to finish that up. So we're limited in our space and where we can put dumpsters, and last thing we want to do is damage new pavement.
Right, I understand. The question I got is it part of the process of turning over the street to the city, and the city, that person, whoever does that inspection at that point in time, would follow up on the completion of
I know
top off?
Jimmy Sanders does look into it because they have to have a bond. I was just wondering from the applicant if they were going to do it and when they're going to do it. And I believe these are privately owned streets.
Are they?
I believe so. I'd have to double check that.
They are.
Okay.
So just wanted to make sure that the balance of the community, any advertising, signage, all of that stuff, with the understanding that the board's approving these, with the understanding that all of that stuff would be restored and brought back and removed, or what, just to clean it up.
So-
because at that point, once they've completed this, they're out of the community.
Let me ask you a question. Is it, even when they privately own the roads, aren't they required to have it inspected as a community as a whole at the end?
They are.
If they're privately owned, generally we have to have it inspected before we turn it over to the HOA. They're gonna hire their own inspectors as well. And
Okay.
so then we're gonna go back and forth as to what needs
Right.
to be repaired.
Okay.
But a municipality is supposed to do the same thing, right?
Yep.
Okay. So whether it be private or not private, when the turnover comes, whether it comes to the HOA or it comes to a municipality, the municipality is part of that process of that turnover
Yes.
to make sure they've complied.
Yep.
Okay. So would you like for us to add to our approval of these, subject to the changes Laura's got to add? Do you want us to add that we want to make it subject to the removal of the trailer at X time and all signs and clean up debris and topping off the balance of the subdivision?
Right. Just to close out the community.
Does that sound good to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make the motion on 663 Greencrest, units 376 through 390, to approve as presented, subject to the understanding that the applicant will remove all sales signs, top off the road, remove all trailers and dumpsters and anything related to construction of the property by the final CO of the last unit.
In regards to the topping, before Lennar commits to that, I need to know exactly what the agreement was, because some of those roads were already developed. So there's a portion in there that we developed and we final topped already because we finished construction right there. But I don't know exactly.
What do we do about the other part that might have been another developer? It's got to be finished. So if they're not finished, you can't leave part of it unfinished. And did y'all make a commitment to finish off the roads?
That's what I don't know to. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a commitment somewhere in there. I just don't know what our commitment was to it.
Well, why don't we do this to where when you understand that commitment, it's going to be still subject to the same thing.
Okay.
But with the understanding that you're going to come back to staff and explain to them where we are on the balance of the roads that you did not have a part in the development of the subdivision.
Okay.
Does that meet everybody's agreement? Okay. I've been bad and not asked for public comment earlier, so I'm going to ask for public comment on this if there's any. Okay. Since no public comment, my motion stands as 663 Greencrest, units 376, 390 approved as presented, subject to the applicant removing all signs, construction debris, trailers, prior to the final CO on the last unit. Also subject to the applicant meeting with city staff to discuss any roads that may not be completed or to explain their agreement when they acquired the development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good to go. Did I really confuse you, man?
No, we're good.
We good? Okay.
Are you going to do the same thing for 394 to 408?
Well, I just want to, I don't want to have to go back and repeat the same statement, so
Just
we will make those things, same thing, subject on,
The building with the trailer will be the last building, so
yes,
that we can
it'll be
use the
408.
trailer.
So we can actually include that when 408, if that's the last unit, whichever one it is that you get to the final CO,
Okay.
whatever number, it's just the final CO on this group of buildings. Okay? I'm going to let you do the honors for the next one since you've got your comments.
Bob, did you have anything in addition to what I have?
No.
Anyone else? Okay, great. All right, I'm going to make a motion to approve 663 Greencrest Lane, Deerfield Green, units 394 through 408, and with the following modifications. That would include on unit 404, change the brick to Shellman Bluff. On unit 398, change the brick color to Sedgefield. On unit 396, change the brick to Cypress Cove. In addition to that, it would include all the same items from the previous units. Do I need to list those, or are we good? Okay.
Very good.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Seth, always good to see you.
Thank you all very much.
Have a good day, sir. Next on the final reviews is 16230 Birmingham Highway, the estates entry.
No, I did not. I will. Yes. Carl Jones. The address is 730 Richmond Glen Drive, Milton, 30004. I have in front of you here structure, an entry structure that we would like to build on the front of the project, and we decided kind of late in the game that we were going to go ahead with private gates, and so we want to do the entry structure here. It's basically made up, as you can see in front of you, stone and brick and cedar shake roof. Has a 1612 roof pitch on it. And it will later be deeded to the HOA. So I'll reserve any time for questions. Be
Mr.
glad
Jones,
to answer any
what
questions.
colors do you plan on using here?
Be traditional earth tones.
Are there any existing amenity structures in the subdivision?
No, other than we'll have a canopy over the mailboxes, and we're required to do the gain mailboxes, and we'll have a kind of a cabana built around that at the rear of the project,
Okay,
but not on the front. There's no pool or tennis court.
okay.
Bring any samples of the stone, brick, or anything like that?
No, but I'll be glad to furnish those.
At least, maybe potentially, can I recommend at least make it subject to staff's review and approval of the building materials, just to make sure that the stone looks.
Are you okay with us?
Yes, sir.
Making the subject to staff approval?
Yes,
meeting
sir.
with the city architect to make sure that the colors meet approval.
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to.
Because it would be a real stone, not a synthetic stone,
Real stone.
like a natural
Right.
stone, right?
Right.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we get that.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Motion to approve agenda item 6C, contingent on the applicant providing colors and building materials for staff approval prior to the building permit being issued.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carl,
Yes.
have a wonderful night.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. How about 15845 Milton Point? Come on down, Robert.
You gonna try my last name?
You know, I was not going to butcher that because I'm not really that smart. Appeal?
Good evening, members of the board, good evening. Thank you for considering my variance application. My name is Robert Pofield. My wife and I live at 15845 Milton Point. That's in the Highland Manor subdivision in Milton, and that's right off of Birmingham Road, near the intersection of Freemanville and Birmingham. We bought our home brand new in 2002, September, and we were the third house in a subdivision of 75 homes, so it was wild and woolly up there with not much to go by on property lines and things like that. Shortly after we purchased our home, we had a pool installed, and that's why we're here tonight, is that it was mistakenly put too close to the property line. And it was many years later after that that we discovered this. It was almost by accident. And we're going to try to get this fixed, and that's why I'm here tonight. I've got 3 boards to show you. They're not too long. Maybe will help you see what's in your handouts there. This board is the most recent survey. This is the one from January, and it basically shows the equipment and pool up against the line, but it does show the fence over the line. So the fence will be fixed once I know what to do. We'll bring it, all we have to do is pull it back in. And this picture here, I can go see a little bit more how rural our home is. So the property line, you can see the pool sits right here, the property line is here, and there's nothing there. Acres and acres and acres of land. The nearest, I believe it's owned by the Day family, and that's, you enter that from the Day Road, which is about a mile away from the entrance to Highland Manor. Okay. No, our neighbors have not complained about the pool or the fence, and our variance sign, request sign, has been up in our front yard since February 2nd. And lastly, this may not be in the handout, but this is what we worked from originally when the pool was approved by the county. As you can see, this shows all the septic tank and all that stuff. Well, you can see that the pool is positioned so that there's a huge amount of distance between the pool and the property line. And we trusted our builder, our pool builder, to do that correctly for us, and that wasn't done. So it was a gigantic mistake. So I'm here tonight to ask you for a variance review. And with that, if you have any questions.
So you're not making any changes right now?
No.
Outside of just trying to get in compliance with the law?
That's correct. We're not going to do anything else back there.
He's proposing just to move the fence to within his property.
Right.
So, I'm sorry.
You know, our job's not to provide a hardship for you as a citizen. You know, obviously, it's a tough spot to be in. So, as long as we're trying to maintain some semblance of trying to stay in order, you're not moving the pool. The pool is where it is. So the whole idea behind it would be to mitigate whatever it could be that we can do. Bob, do you have any questions or anything that you would like to impart in terms of said mitigation?
Normally, the board on these would just make a recommendation to provide additional screening. But in the rear, he's got heavily forested areas, so maybe just the pool equipment if the neighbor.
Really and
would see
truly,
the
I don't
pool
think
equipment, but if-
he's got more than about 6 feet, probably from the pool cope to this property line. Is that about right?
Yes.
So there's really not any room for any greenery through
There's
there.
nothing, and he borders a heavily wooded area, so it'd be crazy, just maybe the pool equipment, if we could just put some recommendation for some
Is the pool equipment right on the property line?
It's up against it, yes.
It is.
But it's not over the line.
And is it enclosed, or is it,
It's shielded by bushes,
it is on all sides?
except the backside.
Oh, except the backside, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be good for the applicant just to note that on the drawing, so that when you go in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, you already let them know that it is shielded by vegetation.
Okay.
Because that's just one of the things, they wouldn't want the neighbors to see the equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Have you spoken to the neighbor to the days at all, or about?
I meant to, the driveway says no trespassing, so I wasn't about to drive up there, and it's very rough up there. So I know I did not ever talk to them.
I don't, do we mail right to the adjoining properties on the variances?
Yes.
We do.
Did?
So
No.
they were noticed.
Okay.
So we've had a sign up, no complaints. They were sent a letter with no complaints,
There's an ad in the paper.
an ad in the paper. I would say that you've done the best that you can do. So, I feel your pain. So, I would like to make a motion to, this is actually a review, so I'm trying to make a motion. Go in favor.
Okay, thank you so much.
Got our blessing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you and have a good day. 4 years ago, or 10 years ago, or something. Goes back when it was Fulton County. Okay. How about 12500 Arnold Mill Road, Oak Map at Crabapple? Too much stuff. Weren't you guys here last month?
We were for a demo permit.
Huh?
For a demo permit, yes, sir.
You look familiar.
Yes, sir.
Is the old house gone?
Yes, sir. All three of them are gone, yes, sir.
Man, I like that wood.
Okay. My name is Jonathan Presley. Address is 2475 North Winds Parkway, Alpharetta, Georgia. And we are here to request 2 variances for Oakmont at Crabapple. The first variance is for minor grading inside the 50-foot stream buffer. And the second variance is for installing pervious pavers inside the 75-foot impervious buffer.
I'm going to start this off by asking Bob and Angela your thoughts.
The only question that staff would raise on this was, whether or not there were alternatives to grading in the buffer, and I think one of the alternatives was a retaining wall, and so the applicant can explain why they went with this as opposed to a retaining wall.
Yep. I guess installing a wall, we figured out through those construction methods would actually disturb more area than actually just doing the grading through digging out for the footer. So the grading is actually less invasive than the wall.
Have you already got the approval from Georgia, the GDOT, for your entrance?
Yes, sir. We have our permit.
So it's not exactly lined up with green, or is it?
Sir?
Your entrance, Birchdale Drive, is it lined up?
It's close to the green. I don't think it's exactly across, but it's, well, here it is. It's pretty close. So it's really close.
Bob, do you have a preference on the grading or the wall?
I don't. Either one would work.
Either one's okay?
Yep.
How about the impervious, which lot are we talking about for the impervious on the 75?
It's actually for a driveway.
20, 24, 23, and 22.
Bottom corner.
Down here.
Okay, see 'em.
It's this highlighted area right here. Come to these lots, 22 through 24.
Mr. Chair, this was a pretty tough site for the applicant because of the nature of that stream buffer, and we wanted to make sure that the houses faced Arnold Mill Road.
Okay.
So in placing them there, they had to work that driveway in. I think they've done a pretty good job trying to get that driveway in for those 3 lots, because we really wanted those lots to face Arnold Mill. So, I would be in support of this because it's, I think the applicant has made really a great attempt in working with staff to try to get these lots placed and the houses placed exactly where we would want them to be.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for anybody on the board?
I mean, we're just talking about the design of it, not necessarily the variance, and so I think we're pretty good here.
So are there, other than the driveways, are the rest of the lots buildable? I mean, are they okay?
Yes, all the lots are outside of the buffer, the stream buffers. It was just that one driveway getting in.
Okay.
It's certainly not within the 25 state, but in the other ones, it would be minimal impact to try to get a driveway for those 3 lots in there.
Okay.
I mean, there's always the opportunity to suggest pervious pavers instead of a asphalt, something that would
What were you
work
planning
with
on
the stream
making the
buffer.
sidewalk out of? I mean, it
Maintain.
says pervious pavers. Pavers means bricks to me. But-
Right.
Which sidewalk?
Well, when you come through here and it says pervious pavers and then asphalt.
Right, the
So I assume you're
driveway.
going to have, what, 20 feet? That is a block, I mean, a brick?
Of the driveway coming through?
Yes.
Yes, so we're looking into a couple options, either pervious pavers or pervious asphalt. So we're looking at both options.
Pavers better.
I don't know how well, I mean, I haven't been back to this particular property in 15 years. However, I did take, you can buy the concrete that's the drier mix.
Yes, sir.
That the water bleeds through it. It has a rough texture to it, but it turned out to be a beautiful product that had a very rural feel to it, but gave you the benefit of a paved driveway as well. I would like, personally, I would like to see y'all stay where it's a pervious surface instead of an impervious surface. And however we can get to that would be the goal.
Okay.
Do we have any questions from the community? This being a review, Bob, do you have no more questions?
No.
Angela?
Thank you.
And gentlemen, y'all are good to go.
Yes, sir.
Next, we're on to 13055 Highway North, Target. Anybody here from Target?
Target?
As my daughter would call it. Okay,
Motion to table agenda item 7C.
I second.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Target has been tabled. Next, we have Hopewell Road, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, to develop a 37,500 square foot church with a maximum seat of 600.
Hi, my name is Pastor Rusty Williams, and I'm pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we have been in existence since about 2005, summer of 2005. We've been in the same location for 9.5 years at 3315 Francis Road. And we got about 120, 150 members attending. We have been, a significant number of our members live in Milton, Alpharetta, Cumming area. And we have been praying for God's leading in a place where we could build a church of our own and not just rent. And so we've located a piece of property, and it's under contract to purchase 10 acres on 14475 Hopewell Road. We have laid the plans out there to you. We also have some other things here to distribute to finish the process there. The civil engineer has turned in their reports as well. We have a copy for each of you. The idea here is for a use permit to be able to build a church there. It is within the zoning for AG1. We took our plans to the city of Milton, and while we were there, they took them and said, no, we need you to look at this and redo it. And so we went out, we studied churches in the area, we studied churches in the city of Milton. We came back, we drew our plans to have the architecture and the feel of the churches in the area. And so you have those colored renderings before you. We also have the full civil drawings here as well. As far as the color, you can see the colors on the board there, the construction materials that will be used. The colors do not really show as good here, but they are colors that come from your palette that was given to us to be able to choose from. We want to be able to follow the City of Milton codes. We want to be good neighbors. The only variance we've looked at is a very short section of the property, and it affects one neighbor. We visited with Mr. Ronald Bogini, and we have actually have a signed letter of his support for that variance. The only issue there is not putting anything there or coming any closer to encroach upon his property, but just to lower the amount of trees needed for screening. If you would like, we also have the full civil set of drawings here that you guys recommend.
Mr. Chair, just so the board's aware, this applicant is looking to build one structure at this time, which is shown on the master plan of Phase 1 site plan. But we did ask the applicant when we met to show us the development of the entire site as a total build-out, so that when they go for the use permit in front of council, it gives all the boards that are going to be in the process of reviewing this application the opportunity to see what the applicant's ultimate build-up would look like and what uses would be on the site and things like that, so you get a better idea of how the site would be developed. So that would be shown on the master site plan on the drawing. And then so the elevations that he's submitting in are for the one building that he's proposing right now.
Is that the worship center?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a Phase 1 worship center.
Brown.
So the first one is the dark brown?
The dark brown one, yes.
Okay.
Those are just potential future phases.
And can you tell me how far off of the right-of-way your first building is?
It is 60 feet right up to the setback off of Hopewell Road.
We're maintaining the rural view shed of the full 60 feet of the rural view shed.
Because, you know, when you put a structure that size, the further away from the road that it can be, the better off we are, I would guess. But
Well, we would agree. We were told that the feel of Milton was to put buildings on the front and put your parking in the back to kind of hide the parking, so that people tend to see the parking. I mean, see the buildings instead of the parking. So we've done what we were asked to do.
okay.
Is there going to be any lighting that's associated with the parking lot?
We do have some of those here in this full set of documents, if you'd like to look at that. I don't know that we've got the full photometric for you tonight, but obviously, other than just normal lighting, we don't want to, obviously, you've got some codes with noise, light pollution and that sort of things, and it would be within those limits. We don't want to disturb our neighbors.
So just so the board's aware that applicant's not really here tonight to review the architecture of the building. He'll do that when he gets his building permit application in. But I did want, as part of the use permit, for the board to see what kind of architecture he's intending and for the community to get a better idea of what this build-out would look like. So the applicant was nice enough to go ahead and develop some plans and to show the board pretty much what this would look like architecturally.
And the variance that you're going to need to do it the way you've got it is?
If I could, we were told to turn this in here. You can see that variance very clearly outlined there. In fact, we've changed that a little bit at the request of our neighbor, and we're asking for 50 feet instead of the 75 on one 230-foot section, and then contiguous to that would be another 230-foot section that we're asking for 25 feet.
25 feet versus 75 feet?
Correct. And we're not trying to encroach any more upon it, just less trees.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You can see on the first site plan that the variance is shaded so you can readily see it.
So, the board, Mr. Chair, so with the variance request, normally you would have a landscape buffer, and landscape buffers per code would require additional plantings. What the applicant's looking for a variance on is to maintain that area, that setback area, in its natural state and not increase the plant material within that zone. And he abuts the farm that's in the back.
It's 4 horse pastures that are contiguous to a neighbor's horse pasture.
Yes.
So it'd be actually just planting a screening there.
You would plant screening on the backside?
Exactly. The gray area would be where the screening would be planted versus, if you can see on there, they had requested us fill that entire 75-foot buffer for that 460 feet, as there is nothing there. It's just an open grass. There's 4 horse pastures that are there.
Okay. Any questions for anybody on the
So I
board?
guess, Bob, what are we looking at here today?
Well, what we're really looking at is it's a use permit. So the code says that these uses are permitted within these areas. However, they are subject to review by this board and the council and the planning commission so that we can ensure that all the items are addressed and that the public has a way to weigh in on these. And if the council wants to add any conditions to those approvals, they can, such as maybe limited parking or whatever the council decides to place. So this board's recommendations would be forwarded to the planning commission and to the council.
Yeah, most of the residential complaints we have that we've seen in the past in churches have been over, we've had the argument about light pollution, noise,
Traffic.
Traffic's can be related, but it's not going to be the same use as residential in terms of the number of cars that go in and out. But obviously on days the church is in, that it's heavier traffic.
Right.
They've also got future school
Right.
listed here.
Yep.
And most of us fear the unknown, I would guess.
Well, we've put that out there. Who knows what 25 or 30 years will bring. We have a large history of parochial schools in our denomination, rather large worldwide. But our schools tend to be rather small, and, we put something out there. We have no idea exactly what the build-out would be. I think that we definitely want to be good neighbors, to be able to be good for our own congregants as well, and to have a workable site. So we put all those plans out there for you. At this point, it's just the phase 1.
Okay. Is there any comment from staff? I mean, what your ideas?
Mr. Chair, I have several comment cards. It might be easier if I just, want me to just read them one by one.
Sure.
For the public to weigh
Right.
in. Okay, so, if you want, you got your...
Would you like for the individuals that wrote those public comment cards to come up?
Yeah, I'll call them. Jim Mulligan,
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, do we need to fill out a card in order to make public comment?
You do,
Yes.
and if you fill one out, we will make sure that you can...
And where can I find
Yeah, right
it?
there on the counter. For anybody who hasn't filled out a yellow card but would like to speak, please feel free to fill out a yellow card, and we will, I'm sure the board will listen to everybody's comments.
I'm Jim Mulligan. I live at 3220 Bridgeshaw Drive in Cumming, and I just am here to support the project tonight. I really don't have any comments.
Okay, thank you.
next we have Ronald Bogino, I'm sorry.
I didn't do it.
Okay, my name is Ronald Bogino, and I'm at 14485 Hopewell Road, Seven Gables Farm. I'm the farm adjacent to the piece of property that they're... I just wanted to say, I've talked with the pastor about the variance. I think the city asked for 75. I said I would be very happy with 50 against my ring, and let's just keep the riders that are training horses safe and not be spooked. So I thought 50 feet would do it. As far as to the pastures where my horses are, 25 foot would do it, because these horses generally don't spook that easy. My whole pasture line is lined with big houses. And I'm here in support of these folks. I would much rather see this church than 5 or 6 or 7 monster houses on Hopewell Road. My understanding is they worship on Saturdays. It's a small congregation. The road is least busy on the weekend, on Saturday or Sunday. So I would welcome them to the neighborhood. And if I could answer anything for you, I'd be glad to.
We appreciate you taking the time to come out.
You're welcome.
Daniel Grantz.
I would just put down for the support. I did not intend to make a comment.
Okay, thank you.
You have to come up and state your name and address for the record, I'm sorry. And just
No problem.
say you're in favor.
My name is Daniel Grintz. I live at 3360 Plantation Trace in Bentgrass Farms, just down the street from the proposed development. I am also a member of this church, and I believe that we do intend to do good and be right by the community. And I just came to support this application.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Russell Williams.
I didn't know exactly the rules and everything. This is me, Pastor Rusty.
So you're for it?
And as far as yeah, I'm for it. And as far as the unknown, we did our best to put everything known down. And so there's that it is before you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick Mosley.
Hi, I'm Rick Mosley, 4335 Old Oak Trace in Cumming. I'm the building chairman for our church, and any structural, architectural questions, I'd be happy to answer. We were here last week to address it to the public, had a very good public meeting. So that's it. I'm in support of the project. Obviously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rhonda Garson.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Garson. I live at 2270 Saddle Springs Drive. We abut the property in Sunnybrook Farms. We have actually, I guess, except for John, the longest contiguous shared property line. We're mostly concerned right now about water runoff. We've lived there over 25 years. We've seen it flood. We've seen, all this water come down, flood out Hopewell Road, flood our detention pond. And if you put a huge parking lot back there, and pave it with an impervious surface like asphalt, I'm afraid it's just going to wash right down on us. And we've expressed this the other day at the meeting. I would definitely prefer to have some sort of impervious surface, like permeable pavers, or you were talking about the permeable concrete, something where we're not going to get the runoff. Because from what I looked at, there's one detention pond right up sort of next to Hopewell. But the parking lot's further back. So the way that land slopes off, it goes straight down and there's a creek down there. It was already filled up when Crooked Creek was built. We were the subdivision that had the lake filled in from all the silt. So we know what the runoff can be. We're also concerned about septic. The first phase, if it was just the first phase, that's one thing. But if you're talking about the first phase and then we're approving for all these others, where are the other detention ponds going to be? Because if the first phase, if that one detention pond is there, that's one thing. But if you build out the whole rest of it, there's nothing on there for more detention ponds. And the impervious surface, we're worried about that. We're also worried about screening, because mostly what's there right now are 100-foot tall pine trees. You can't plant under those. You can hopefully plant in front of the parking lots. But when I walk out my back deck, if I'm going to see a parking lot, that's just really not... Right now I see trees and a riding ring. To look out and see on the weekends, just see a row of cars, it's not really, And like I said, we've been there 25 plus years, so that's kind of changing the character of it. If it's there, I really would like it screened. I really don't want floodlights or anything where, on the weekends. Basically, we just don't want it to look bad, and we're really concerned with runoff because, like I said, we have seen that flooded so many times.
One of the things that will happen as part of the process, they will have to have a hydrology study. They will have to make sure that the water that lands on their parking lot stays on their property. So, and it leaves at a metered rate that will not flood that creek. Now, the rules may be exactly what they are today on the first structure. But the reality of it is when they come to build the additional structures, the rules may in fact get even stricter. They are stricter today than what they were 10 years ago.
And if they get a use permit today for all the structures, will they still have to come back when they get ready to build them?
They will have to do it is my understanding, please correct me if I'm incorrect, Bob, but I believe that they will have to do a hydrology study based on the parking lot and the building they put there at this time. The fact that they've already got a kind of plan of what they want to do generally is a good thing. However, I don't believe that they are absolutely married to that. I think that they may have to change it based on, quite frankly, the rules changing by the time they get around to pulling a permit. So at the time they get ready to build a new structure or do something differently, they'll be coming back to the design review board. They're going to be coming back to the city. They'll be going through staff approvals. And the last thing that any of us want is for them to be damaged. I understand clearly how you feel. They're building new stuff around me currently, and short of me buying it.
We're not against it per se. It's
Right.
just the first building is completely different than if the whole thing got built out.
Right.
Plus, and I've said this from the beginning when we first got the thing, I just don't want it all washing down on me because the lay of that land is it goes from high right down into a wetland creek.
I know. I drive it every day.
And I'm sure you have seen it where
I have.
Hopewell has been level. We have a detention pond, and I've seen that where it's been across our dam, across Hopewell Road, filling in all of that, the gully that's on the right-hand side of Hopewell. And if that's not properly done, it will fill up those pipes under that road, and you will have. I've seen too many cars in those ditches over 25 years. You know how it is.
I know. I live on Freemanville. I got
Yeah.
plenty of cars coming in my yard.
Are you the first or second house on the left?
We are the very first house in Sunnybrook Farms.
Okay, so you've
We
got a
have that
pool in your
long fence line that will directly abut. So, as far as everybody else kind of wants it shoved back in the property, I'm more for it being towards the front because at least that part abuts our pasture, and
Right.
that's not as bad as walking out on the back deck. what we will basically see is more or less the parking area. If that can be screened, with something right in front of where the parking lot is, that will make it a lot better. And if you can, if somebody's going to be monitoring the runoff, because I don't want to have to be calling every 5 minutes saying, we're flooding again.
Well, I can tell you that our stormwater folks here are good. Our staff's really a good staff. Can I tell you that you absolutely will never have a problem ever? I'm not a...
Well, at least we've got somebody to call now. I mean, when
Right.
we lived there, it's been Fulton County, and you didn't have
And they
anybody
didn't
to
care.
call. They could not have cared possibly less. That
Well,
was-
I can tell you this, that everybody I've met that works at the city, they really do care, and they are good people. And so there are steps that these folks will have to take that will ensure that they have complied with the rules and regulations as it relates to everything that's related to the building of this building. They will have to come back if this gets through, and once they come down and they need to build the building, they're going to be back in front of us to discuss the building. We're going to need materials, colors, landscape plans. There's a lot to this. And so our public is better protected today than it ever has been. And I'll share one story with you quickly, is I had a chance to sell a piece of property to a church. And the community around it fought the church, and we didn't get the church built. Today stands 38 houses on a piece of property that could have had a church.
Well, and that's what we're trying to balance, one church as opposed to probably 7 houses.
Right.
So I'm going to be looking at 7 backyards or one church.
Mhm.
As long as it's not a mega church with a mega school. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's really hard to...
One of the good places for you to go look, quite frankly, for an example of how well the city does or does not do, go look at St. Francis.
Oh, I go by there all the time.
But they've done a really wonderful job at the layout of that piece of property, and you got to give it to the people that wanted the church, that wanted that school. But the reality is, I've sat here and listened to everything that the staff has brought up that they've wanted them to do, and they've made that a nice project to be near.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality of it is that with a little bit of work with the community and a little bit of work from the staff, then we can end up making this be something that is good for the community as a whole.
Well, I think as long as you're going to review it each and every time
Every
anything
single
comes
step.
back, and to make sure that we are protected from noise pollution, light pollution, water runoff especially. I mean,
And
it's just-
lighting's have really improved, quite frankly.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, we now have LED lights that are big lights that go up that can be lights currently, the ones they make for these big facilities. They can go 300 looms is the amount of moonlight there is on a normal full moon light. They can make those lights go down to 300 looms when nobody's active, and when it's active, somebody drives in it, they can brighten them up as to
Well,
be
are there
protected.
also times of day that where like after 8 o'clock it has to be shut off, or is there any? Does the city have any parameters for that sort of thing?
I don't think that shutting off the lights completely into a parking lot of that type is good for the community or good for the church, but
But it has to be screened, so it's not like.
But it's screened, but there are ways, and you will get lots of opportunity between now and then during the development process of developing out that building, that parking lot, as to those specific things and those specific needs that you have. The fact is, we understand because, as I said in my opening statement, noise, traffic, light pollution. Those are the key things when it comes up to churches. That's what we hear the most of. That will be something that we'll have to be the most sensitive about. So there are mitigating things that we can do and that we can ask the applicant to do that are not cumbersome to them, burdensome in terms of financially. And it will work out, and you will get more opportunity, as everybody will, to be a part of that process and have input. And so I would implore you to work with the system and see and let us prove to you as a homeowner that what you've elected people to do, what everybody here on this board is a volunteer. And so none of us, I don't know anybody at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, not a single solitary soul. So having said that, we just want to do the right thing for everybody, including the church, including our community that's around us, and do the responsible, correct thing. So you'll get lots of opportunity, and just be apprised. And They'll be advertised, I would suggest, isn't that right? Advertised notice of the developments of the building.
Well, not for the developments of the building. Well, there'll be an agenda for the DRB, for the land disturbance permit and for each building.
There you go.
And I'm on the email list, so I assume it comes out with each agenda or whatever. Yeah.
And so you'll get to see, and the wonderful part of what you got right now is you get to be part of the process. Before, quite frankly, we were not part of anything.
Well, I know what it was like before.
We have a, subsequent to this meeting would be the planning commission. So that these folks that are interested can attend that meeting as well and voice concerns. And then, of course, the council, when it's in front of the council, that's the ultimate. So
yeah, so you got the BZA, and you've got that you get to come before again.
Well, that was the question I have. Is we're going to be out of town for the next meeting, for the council meeting. Is there a way to send in a list of concerns, and who should I send those to?
Yeah,
I would suggest to Angela. Would that be right?
Mm-hmm.
Send a written list of what we were concerned about. Okay.
Because I tell you, staff, they want to do the right thing. They really do. They listen to what you have to say. And if they think that's a legitimate concern, and they do, we have guidelines we follow, and if it's a concern, then you're a citizen and we need to answer them.
Right. And the city clerk will read that letter into the record the night of the council meeting, so it'll be publicly heard.
Great.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carson.
We have 3 more. This one, I apologize, I can't read the name, but the address is 840 Fox Hollow Run.
Never read my name. I knew who it was the minute you opened your mouth. My name's Edward Grzinski, and I live on Fox Hollow Run in Milton. Fox Hollow Run, if you look at the plans there, is directly across from the proposed entrance of the church.
Yep.
And that is a community of about 40 homes. I am opposed to this permit in its entirety, and I am hopeful that the council will ultimately decline this petition or this request. I have a short list of reasons why. I'm going to continue to develop a longer list, but just from the top, very concerned about the view shed and the whole pastoral, equestrian, rural nature of Hopewell Road, particularly in that whole section. I believe that this proposed construction is completely inconsistent with keeping that sort of pastoral appearance to that section of Milton. I also believe, I'm not certain of this, but I believe Hopewell in that section is considered a scenic drive. This will disrupt the scenery, I think, pretty substantially. You mentioned 3 types of pollution: noise, light, and sound. I believe there's actually a 4th one, which is visual. When you start putting large commercial construction into rural equestrian areas, I think you've got a pretty inconsistent appeal to that. I would, if we do have to succumb to this development, I would like to propose and see that the driveway be moved so that it's not directly across from the entrance to Greystone. On the subject of traffic, which I know you guys don't want to talk too much about, I understand that this church holds services not just on Saturdays but also on Wednesdays, so we can expect large traffic activity on Saturdays and Wednesday evenings. They also hinted at the last meeting that they might consider renting their church on Sundays to another denomination, which means we would have a 3rd day of the week where we have massive traffic on that rural section of Hopewell Road. And then the other thing is, with a school, we're not going to be restricted to just 3 days. They indicated there would not be a bus service for the school, so you would have a chain of parents driving in the morning to drop their children off and then leaving, and of course the same thing in the afternoon. Another concern is the erosion of the tax revenue base of the city of Milton. I understand the churches do not pay taxes, which means that that property will not generate revenue for the city, which means the rest of us have to make up for that, which would include all of the citizens living around that area that might be opposed to this. In addition to that, it seems to me that in reviewing the comprehensive plan for the city of Milton, this proposed use permit in that particular area is completely inconsistent with the comprehensive plan of the city. And I would ask that, we try to stay consistent with that. And then finally, I know I'm one guy standing up here, but I am organizing a citizens group. I hope to show up before the next meeting with at least 300 signatures on a petition opposing this use permit. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michelle McMaster.
Hi, I'm Michelle McMaster. I live at 2300 Saddle Springs Drive, Alpharetta, or Milton. I am the other property that is right on the side of the church, and I will have a parking lot. I will have the parking lot and lights in the back of my yard. So when I go out to enjoy my backyard and my pool and my relaxing area, it is not going to be that anymore. I don't have a particular opposition to churches. Churches certainly are good neighbors. They typically are. But this is not just going to be a church. It's going to be a school. They proposed a school. There's certain activities that come with a school. It can be 7 days a week. When you're talking weekend and you're having church services, if they do rent out their sanctuary, we're going to have more traffic. We're going to have more noise. We're going to have more people in that area. It's already very difficult. I'm the second house in that subdivision, and it's like a racetrack on Hopewell Road. And I can't imagine that it's going to get any better when we add more traffic into there, especially if there's a church, there's people there's no bus service, so there are going to be parents bringing their children there and picking up. And frankly, it's a small piece of property, and they're jamming a lot of stuff in there. And and asking to decrease setbacks it just doesn't make any sense to decrease a setback when you have a parking lot and another large building there. If they were going to just build the church and only have the church there and guarantee that they're not going to build a school, I might feel better about that. And with good screening and make sure the runoff, I also have concerned about runoff in my yard. So I would hope that you all would really consider this. And I just think that unfortunately, you have to grow your community, but I don't know. The tax revenue isn't going to be an issue here. There is no tax revenue from there. So, I just wanted to say that, and thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
And are there any more cards? I have one more. Are there any more? So last we have Janice Grants.
My name's Janice Grants, and I live at 3360 Plantation Trace. I am a member of this church as well, and our only goal is to give back and to aid the community. So I am in favor of this decision.
Thank you for taking the time. Any other public comment? Okay, open it up for the board. Okay. The board doesn't have, anybody have any comment? You good? Okay.
The board can make or should make recommendations to the planning commission and the council, because they'll be read that night of the council meeting. So I was running down some things that if you'd like to just hear.
Okay.
One key element that was raised was to absolutely maintain the rural view shed in its natural state, so that when you're driving along Hopewell Road, it maintains that scenic view. The next one would be, on the noise level, would be to maybe recommend no external PA systems or anything like that, like normally you'd get in a school.
Okay.
The lighting would be addressed by the night sky ordinance, which is pretty restrictive as it is now, but if you want to add any additional requirements as far as times or
Is that
anything
pretty
like
similar to what I
It is pretty
suggested?
similar to what you suggested. The last one that I think was potentially could be recommended was for the people on the south property line that are concerned about parking, maybe we want to suggest increasing that buffer in its dimension or in its landscaping or screening.
Okay.
That would, yield them more screening and appease the visual impact that they think that they would possibly get affected by.
Okay.
As far as drainage and which has been raised, I mean, they will have to conform to very restrictive, all water must be maintained on site, all water quality issues must be addressed. So all of that stuff is addressed per code, and it's in
Right.
there. As far as the septic systems are concerned, that's all county, and they'd have to work with the county to maintain, whatever room they need for the septic.
Now, is it Bob, and this is probably going more directly to the pastor of the church. Can we limit their ability to rent the building?
Well, certainly, I think the council has the ability to put conditions of approval on a use permit. So recommendations such as limiting
I'm just
anything
asking
with
the question,
school
so-
or renting the facility or hours of operation. I mean, that's what the use permit would be in front of the council for. So like when they did the other types of use permits for, say, a special event facility, they can certainly dictate occupancy, maximum occupancy or maximum parking and things like that, time frames. So the council will have the ability, if it so chooses, to impose conditions on the applicant.
Would not renting the church out for the other days, would that be a condition that you think the church might be able to live with? I'm trying to address one problem at a time.
I haven't heard from the church, so I don't know on that
I'm
particular
ask-
issue, but and we could certainly have them come back up.
Okay.
But I mean, it is a concern, and it could be a recommendation of this board to the council and to the planning commission to say, hey.
Right.
Listening to that one question, I don't think it would kill the deal. I know that by renting out to like kind, it does fall under a use permit as far as most every other city ordinance that I was aware of in other areas.
I'm not trying to be restrictive, I'm just trying
Yeah.
to find a way to overcome what the objections we have.
I'm listening.
May I address with it? The only thing I could foresee that we're talking about a limited time frame. Our congregations is we talk about mega churches. There's 150 folks. That's about 42 cars I counted last week from a period between 9 and 1. So if there was a potential traffic issue, you're talking 40 cars, which if you can imagine if it was residential or some other use in that property, 40 cars is not a lot that would come in at 9 and leave at 1. So a time frame would be certainly, so it wouldn't be an all-day rental. But you're literally looking at a 9 o'clock entrance and a 12 or 1 departure.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir. They're asking for a 600.
Can you come up to the mic, please?
Yes.
They're asking for a 600-seat sanctuary and a 90-seat school. I would love to see how they're going to get all those people there in 40 cars.
Well, obviously, the comment that he's reserved at this point is their current congregation. What they're really doing is a proposed, what it could possibly grow to. They're
I
certainly
understand
not
that,
there
but the
now.
permit calls for that.
Right.
Okay, so as a taxpaying citizen, I have to address and deal with what's on the table from a permit point of view.
Right.
Okay, and, they keep referencing their first phase, but they're asking for a 600-seat sanctuary
Well, I
and
think
a
part of that
90-seat
came
school.
from the fact that we asked for, what is your end goal?
I understand that, so maybe they were done a disservice, or maybe they weren't, I don't know.
Well, I think we did a better service by the city, by everybody knowing exactly what's going to
I
happen.
think you did too. That's why I'm
So-
focused on the total permit as opposed to Phase 1. There were a couple of other things that I neglected to mention, and since other people were getting up, if you'd bear with me for just a moment. On the matter of septic, one of the concerns that I have is that when the school opens, if they start to provide food service and they use plates and cutlery and so forth, that exponentially expands the need for their septic capabilities. So we're very concerned about that. And then when Bob was going through the list there, he didn't mention my suggestion about moving the entrance to a less obtrusive area, and then they could possibly wind a driveway in behind the 60-foot setback, so that, my goal would be if the church ends up there, I'd love to come out onto Hopewell Road and not see it at all.
Right.
Not see it at all. So, anyways, thanks.
All right, thank
Bob,
you.
just a couple of things. So, listening to all the input and some of the homeowners that are right there, and I certainly do understand their concerns. I guess where I'm struggling right now is trying to understand, so, and this is just not this piece of property, this is Milton in general. Through our planning, what do we envision as homeowners sell this stuff? I know we've been talking about eco communities and all of this, so, here's a piece of property that's getting sold. What's our plan? I mean, what are the potential we know we have homeowners here, we know, so, I struggle with this consistently that we've got to have a handle on where we're headed here. And I'm not sure we always do, because we can't just say, well, gee, we'll try and figure out something. So, for me, and I'm sure other people on the board, I don't know if this is the right answer for this property or not. I know what potentially some other answers could be, and that could be some other homes. But let's look at, our objective for Milton was to try and preserve some of our open land. So I'm trying to balance, A or B. But the other thing I would comment on as well is the traffic situation, and this I'm constantly frustrated with, in that we can't keep building stuff and adding more cars because there just isn't room. That is the reality of the situation. If any of us have been driving on the roads lately, and it's not just from us, it's from north, coming from Forsyth and Cherokee County. They come through these roads. It creates more traffic. We have to look at the whole bigger picture when we're looking at adding more traffic to the roads. And that's not just a church. That's, if we build homes, what does that look like? If we add more traffic, what does it look like? So, I'm not just picking on the church, but I'm just saying in general, anytime applicants are coming forward and we're looking at variances, church is great, it looks good, but I'm still not, I don't understand what all the impacts are. I can't look at this and say, I don't know when they want to build out, and they potentially have 600 people in the church, what's the traffic situation look like? We need to have an understanding and plan for the future, which is something I don't think, and it's not just us, it's our whole region doesn't do a good job doing that. It's state issue as well, so.
Just one second. Any other comment from the board?
The only thing I would add here is I think that we're talking about the aesthetics of this building and or the layout of the property, correct? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily when it's used or when it's not used, correct, or how it's used per se, but we're really just talking about assuming this goes through, that's not for us to decide. That's for another board to decide. We want to make this look as nice as possible, mitigate any of the concerns that fellow residents may or may not have about this, so that if it does pass, it's something that they can live with, right?
That's correct.
So that being said, I would offer two suggestions. One, I would attempt to kind of rework the parking lot here in phase one to move it back from the setback so that it's not on this 75-foot buffer or right on it. Any attempt to kind of rework it so that it's so that the Garrisons and the McMasters have minimal impact if possible. Mm-hmm. To the extent that there is parking or wherever it is parking that it borders any other property line, it should be screened with trees that are appropriate for screening so that they can reduce the amount of light that they see and or cars that they see on Saturday or Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day these folks are coming, to eliminate that. And if that means that this future admin building has to be moved in the short term to put parking up there up close, then unfortunately I think that's probably where some more parking should move to pull it from the backside. Just a thought. And then I noticed here they have the dumpster down in the back corner, kind of right on the border of the Garrisons and the McMaster's property line. It's got it on this piece. I don't know if y'all see it. It's a little square right there next where it says Future Rain Garden. Let's move that dumpster closer to the property, one, so that nobody has to smell the dumpster downwind, and two, so that when the dump truck does come, which is very loud and obnoxious, it only has to come so far into the property, not all the way into the back, and provide as little disturbance as possible. Other than that, I think they're going to come back for what the building's actually going to look like. Is that correct?
We'll come back for the land disturbance permit, the site, and each building.
So then we can talk about what the building looks like at that point. But in terms of layout, those are my suggestions.
So here's a question too on use. So if use goes forward, then the potential for all this to be built happens or not? Or could you restrict it to just say just a church?
Yeah, the council has the purview to approve the best case scenario, their maximum build out, or, anywhere in between.
I got one more question for Bob and Angela. If they didn't ask for the variances, would they be in absolute conforming state to where they could put a church here if that's what they wanted to do?
If they didn't ask, I believe, if they didn't ask for the variance, there would be no reason for staff just going by the rules.
Rules.
To not support it.
Okay.
They're meeting all the use permit criteria.
Come on up to the mic. Okay.
I just wanted to address, is it Marty? So,
That's me. We're just,
okay.
That's really Marty right there.
I don't know your name, but just...
That's Laura.
Laura.
Thank you, Laura. A couple of responses to some of the things you said. First, the property has not been sold. It's under contract with a contingency. So if the permit is turned down, it's not going to disrupt, or it's not going to put them in a hardship where they then have to resell the property. The second thing is, you talked about what is the long-term plan, and one of the comments I made was, if you read the comprehensive plan for the city of Milton, this is very inconsistent for that part of the city, very inconsistent. So that's it.
That was my question.
All right. You're welcome to come.
I did want to say I really appreciate your comment about the
You have to speak into the mic.
It's Rhonda Garson, 2270 Saddle Springs Drive. I wanted to say thank you for the dumpster because we don't really have a copy of that per se. And yeah, anything you can do to help that, because we've lived for 25 years with horse manure smells in the hot of the summer. And those are quite overwhelming. So if you can move the dumpster back to the front, that would be great. And I think I wholeheartedly support adding as much buffer as you can with trees, because right now we have owls, we have deer, we have raccoons, we have all sorts of wildlife, and that's what Milton's going for with all the eco and everything. We also have a stream, we have herons, we have all kinds of wildlife. We don't want to see that disturbed any more than we have to, so I think any greenery that you can give us will help in that too. So
there's not any fencing around this property, is there?
There is.
Now?
There's four-board fencing on our side. That was the other problem we have is the lady who used to own it, her dead trees have taken out about 10% of it because they would always fall. And so that's one thing that... Well, Maureen, when Maureen lived there, yeah. But after Danielle, anyway, we've had trouble with dead trees taking out, and we haven't repaired it. So that's something that probably will need to be repaired. But they just kept falling and couldn't ever get them fixed.
We
So,
understand.
yeah. But so the four-board fencing with hog wire is fine with us, what's there now.
Come on up, sir.
Is her name Marty?
Okay.
Your name Marty? ma'am?
I'm Marty.
Oh.
I'm
Laura.
Oh, Laura, you went into the makeup of Milton. I wish there was more consideration about how many farms we're actually losing. You know, the makeup, the equestrian area is getting less and less and less. There's not a month that goes by that I'm not approached by a developer. I hate to see that happen. I wish.
I do
I
too,
wish we
you
could
know,
keep
it's-
our farms.
But the sad truth is, when people get older, they
Yeah.
need the money and they want to sell, and they're going to sell to whoever gives them the
The
most.
property values are so high, I get tempted myself. I'm not going to, that's my home, but it's really
Well, we
shame.
appreciate
Even
you
where
for it.
Greystone is, there was Greystone Farm there, and they sold that, and now, of course, we have more houses, which is fine, everybody's entitled to it, but I wish it, anyway, just thought, thank you for.
Good deal. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion on this? I know that, what your recommendation, there's no any motions on this?
It's the recommendations
Okay,
to
your
the next
comments
board.
Your comments will be the
Have recorded.
ones that we will use.
Okay. Which
Everybody okay
includes
with
your
that?
comments of moving the parking or the buffer.
Buffer, dumpster.
And the dumpster.
Yes.
Okay.
And the dumpster.
Very well. Moving on, can I,
Is that the last one?
that is the last one, isn't it?
Yes.
That's it. Onward to new business.
I have none.
Okay.
Just a reminder about the work session. That's
That follows
starting
this?
7:30? Okay.
now.
Any old business?
I have none.
No.
I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
shrunken, as well as most, really it only applies to non-residential issues. So if a church came in, or a school, something like that, then the Highway 9, if it was within these purple areas, that would apply to that. So the Highway 9 does not apply to single-family residential, which is by far the majority of the areas.
Great.
I don't know, maybe at some point we may decide to do away with it or not, but for now, this is. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, good evening, Planning Commission and Design Review Board members. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Caleb Rossico, and I'm with the planning firm of TSW, and have actually been working with the City of Milton for over 3 years now on creating new ways to zone and regulate in important activity centers and corridors in the City of Milton. A little bit of background. You may remember that when we first started working with you in 2012, we embarked on a process to take what is called the Smart Code, which was a sort of generic zoning template for a form-based code district, and make it relevant to the City of Milton. We had an extensive process to review all of your area plans, both in Crabapple and also within the Deerfield Livable Centers Initiative, and focus on the important elements of those plans that could be put into this locally calibrated code. Those two efforts were adopted. I guess, do I have to push it, point it behind me?
It might not get us, just push the button up on the side.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very, more technical issue.
Oh, we have to put the, oh, we have to put the thing in the,
Oh, sorry. So anyway, Crabapple, as Kathy mentioned, was adopted in 2012, and Deerfield was adopted in 2013, generally speaking, based on the Crabapple model. Now, so staff has had over 2 years now to work with these codes, and generally speaking, they have worked very well. They have changed the character of development, especially in the Crabapple area where the village environment continues to grow and continues to evolve. But they've also begun to change the nature of new development in Deerfield. Not as much time has been able to pass to actually allow that development to rise from the ground, but the city has been permitting several projects consistent with it. But like any zoning code or any development regulation, in the process of working with a code, you invariably find things that could have been done better, or that could have been reworded, or specific issues emerge that really warrant further consideration. So we're here tonight to talk about some of those changes. Now, as Kathy mentioned, both Deerfield and Crabapple have many, many common elements. Deerfield was actually crafted using a lot of the local language that was created for Crabapple. The goal is for the city to have common terms, common definitions, common regulations to the extent that they can. So there are a lot of changes that really apply to both of the districts. The first change is found in the part of the code that speaks to transfer development rights. Both of these form-based codes allow for transfer of density from rural properties in AG1 zoned areas or within what are called TDR sending areas to the receiving areas of the form-based code. Now, in the process of administering the code, it was found that there was a potential loophole in the language. One of the terms in the code said that properties could be essentially subdivided and continue to transfer their TDR rights to receiving areas. That was certainly not the intent of the code and was arguably vague at best. But what we have done is to rewrite that particular part of the code. So it now says that any lot of record, meaning a lot that is officially recorded with the county, can be under the minimum size required for transfer development rights and continue to transfer those to other receiving areas. Without this particular reference to the lot of record provision, there was concern that a developer could buy a 100-acre property, could subdivide it into small lots, and then continue to transfer the density from those small lots. So what we've done is essentially capped or frozen the lot size that could be used to transfer TDRs to receiving areas. So it's a very technical change, but it's one that we feel strongly addresses a potential loophole in the code. One of the other areas of the code that has been changed after review has been the block sizes. Now, you may remember that all of these form-based codes focus on creating interconnected streets and really avoiding dead ends. With that said, some of the language wasn't as strong as it could be. For example, some of the public works language did not actually speak to the maximum length of the dead-end streets. And so these proposed changes would, one, limit dead-end streets where you have to build them to a maximum of 150 feet at the recommendation of Carter. And also, we've clarified the maximum block size requirements where stub streets are. Essentially, what this means is that there will invariably be conditions, such as the photo here in Crabapple, where a development occurs next to a vacant property that will redevelop in the future. We have beefed up the language so that it's very clear that those streets must stub into the property, and the process for calculating how long those streets can be is now defined. Another area of the code related to feedback from Public Works that has changed is the actual use of the different street types. Now, when it was originally crafted, the Crabapple and Deerfield codes gave developers incredible flexibility. They could do 60, 70, 80 different street cross-sections. Now, the problem with that is we have found that developers tend to want to do the minimum requirement. They'll look at all the code flexibility and they'll say, what is the minimum I have to do? And so we have worked with Carter to develop very specific street cross-sections that are now defined. These are in a new part of the code. I believe it's Table 3. And essentially, these are a handful of sections that can be used in this area. Now, those sections have been designed in accordance with concerns about fire access. And also, importantly, they have been designed with provisions for on-street parking. Because one of the other issues that has emerged is that as new subdivisions and new developments have gone in, there haven't been adequate provisions for guest parking. And so we've made sure that all of the new streets now in the new subdivisions within Crabapple and Deerfield will be wide enough to accommodate street parking for guests. And again, this is just an example of the particular tables of the code showing what the sections look like. Now, another area of the code where there was a little bit of need for tweaking was in the public frontages, which essentially talk about what you have to do if you redevelop a property on an existing public street. As you may remember, when a property is redeveloped, for example, on Highway 9 or Webb Road or any other property, the developer has to go in and put in place wider sidewalks with street trees and landscaping and all of the aesthetic amenities that the code calls for. The problem with that is that there may be certain cases where a developer is going in and developing on a street where the City of Milton or DOT or some other entity has already spent a lot of money putting in the streetscape. And so what we have done here is we have made an exception for that so that city staff can waive the requirement for streetscapes on existing roadways if those public infrastructure have gone in. The idea is that it doesn't make sense from a public policy perspective for a developer to rip up and replace what the city or the public funds have just spent money on. And another area of change is regarding civic spaces. Civic spaces are essentially what we call parks and open spaces in these form-based codes. In the course of reviewing projects, city staff found out that the type of civic spaces that were defined were great, but we needed another one. A lot of developers were coming in and trying to do what were called pocket parks, essentially very small green spaces that really serve as neighborhood amenities for one or two streets, not entirely development-wide amenities. However, in the process of doing that, they were in some ways taking advantage of the code by making these pocket parks very, very narrow and very long, essentially creating park spaces that weren't truly usable. And so there is now a proposed change that would define specific standards for pocket parks, essentially in terms of size and amenities, but also would define a specific width for all civic spaces, essentially speaking of 60 feet. Now, there's only one case where that would not apply. That would be for parks that are more than 8 acres in size, essentially huge properties. And where that would really come into play is if you were doing a park and you had a little sliver that tied into a residential street or cut between houses and tied into a residential street. But for the most part, all of these other parks and open spaces now have minimum size provisions. And again, based directly on staff comment. And then a final change that applies to sort of public amenities in projects is a new provision that puts the City of Milton form-based codes in conformance with current practices of the U.S. Postal Service. As you may know, the U.S. Postal Service is now requiring all major new developments to provide common mail facilities. And even though that is a requirement that supersedes zoning, we did want to put in place in these form-based codes that those have to be provided as well, just so developers who are building under the code and using it are familiar with that requirement. Another area where we haven't really changed the codes as much as cleaned them up is regarding building height. Now, all of these form-based codes, Crabapple and Deerfield, have varying definitions for building height depending on what transect zone you're in. The problem is that they are primarily defined in terms of number of stories. And even though there is a requirement in another part of the code that talks about how high stories can be, there wasn't a unifying diagram showing how tall buildings could be in both stories and feet. So we have taken all of the height diagrams in the form-based code and added the actual height that would be provided. Again, by essentially taking what was already in the code in other parts and also putting it in here just to be very, very, very clear, so that essentially applicants and city staff don't have to do the math, and it's very evident what the requirement is. Another area where we have made a lot of changes is regarding function and use, which essentially means what happens on a property. When we took the template for the SMART code, we essentially carried over a variety of use definitions that were customized for Crabapple and Deerfield, but in some ways were too vague. They did not reference a lot of the uses that the City of Milton had used in these areas, and they left a lot up to administrative interpretation or administrative discretion. What we have done is essentially to completely revamp this part of the code. We have removed any of the SMART code terminology and replaced it with City of Milton terminology. The idea being it makes sense to have standard use definitions and use provisions in every part of the zoning code. So this has significantly been cleaned up, but primarily, again, through changing the names of individual uses to match city standards, not necessarily to allow additional uses. However, with that said, there are a few use standards in Crabapple, which I will talk about. So, in the Crabapple area, one of the new provisions that will be in the code, and actually wasn't in the draft that was handed out, is regarding an ability to encourage or support what I would call very small or mixed-use multifamily buildings. Today, your current regulations are one size fits all. And essentially, what they say is that if you are doing an apartment, regardless of whether it is 2 units or 300 units, developers have to provide certain types of amenities. They have to provide certain types of sizes, certain parking facilities, pools, etc. Now, this kind of provision that is in your use standards of your code makes absolute perfect sense for 250 to 300 unit apartment deals. Where it does not make sense is very small neighborhood scale apartments or mixed use settings. And so we have proposed creating two new additional types of apartment uses within Crabapple and only within Crabapple. The first one of these uses would be what we call loft apartments, an example which is shown at the top. This would essentially be an apartment building that must have ground floor commercial uses. So you may remember that there are height restrictions in Crabapple, essentially limiting buildings to 3 floors. This kind of district would allow that kind of apartment above retail by right.
Can I just interrupt for one thing? Just remember when we say apartment, that apartment doesn't speak to ownership.
Yes.
Apartment could be either
And to Kathy's point, it is extremely unlikely that a rental property would be this tiny, because the way the institutional rental owners work is they need, again, typically between 250 and 300 units to make the deals work. So I would imagine that 95% of these, if not 100% of these, would actually be condominium products. So we've proposed creating a definition of the loft, which would be, again, over retail, and also a definition for a different kind of apartment use, which we're calling the neighborhood apartment. Essentially, this would be a smaller development with a maximum of 30 units that would be allowed by right in the Crabapple district. Again, it's not going to be one of your massive, large communities. It would be, in fact, designed per the code regulations to look more like single family. This actually happens to be a 4-unit apartment building over in the city of Kennesaw, which was also built under one of these form-based codes. And the intent here is that these kind of very small neighborhood-scale multifamily uses could be allowed by right without having to go through the conditional use permit, and more importantly, having to provide all of the additional pools, et cetera. There really is very little chance of a developer who is doing a 6 to 12 unit condominium building being able to comply with any of the use provisions that are otherwise in your apartment or multifamily use standards.
So, just a quick question. So you're saying not to exceed 30 units per development. The development is a collection of those rather than one single building.
That is correct. Those could occur in one 30-unit building, or they could actually occur in 5, 6-unit buildings.
So one 30-unit building is possible?
Yes, as currently written. We have not actually revised this, and I would argue that perhaps you do want to make the actual building size smaller. I know that in the city of Roswell, they actually do limit in their neighborhoods apartment buildings to between 6 and 8 units. So that's certainly something that could very easily be done.
A lot of times you see some of these smaller units where it's like there's 5 rows of apartments and there's parking kind of in between. It would be my preference that you don't have this kind of like stacks where it's just like these rows of apartments kind of backing up with parking between it. It's more like the apartment complex is like up on a main street front. Kind of, does that make sense? So it's not just like all these rows of 5 apartment complexes moving back.
Well, the form-based code would mandate that. So that's already built into the code.
And I believe, now that you've reminded me, we do have a universal building footprint restriction in Crabapple, which I believe is 15,000 square feet. Is that correct, Kathy? Do you remember? Yeah. So the reality is the 30 units, assuming it was a 2-story building, would be fairly compatible. So there is already that provision as well. Any other questions about this particular change? Okay. And then one of the other changes in Crabapple, which is really carrying over something we learned in Deerfield, is that Crabapple did not specifically speak to how stormwater is handled. And so when we wrote the Deerfield Code, we spent a lot of time talking about where stormwater should go, and essentially what the code in Deerfield says is it needs to be behind the building or it needs to be treated as an amenity. And so what we've done here is take that one piece of Deerfield, which, as you remember, occurred after Crabapple was written, and put it back into Crabapple as well. So there is a very clear ability now to do parks and open spaces that incorporate stormwater features. But as Kathy mentioned, quite a bit of this effort actually focused on revisions to the Deerfield area, and primarily based on the visioning study that was done for the State Route 9 North plan. When I was given the plan, I was directed to go through it line by line and identify every single element in the State Route 9 North plan that could be put into this code. As you probably are aware, the city went through an extensive and actually even mediated process to come up with exactly what the community vision was for State Route 9 North. So it is incredibly precise and incredibly specific. It actually shows varying sidewalk requirements on different streets. It talks about buffer conditions on different streets, especially at 5 Acre Road. And so what we did is we essentially took all those very specific provisions and put them in place for this code. So how did we do that? Well, what I did not want to do in writing this sort of extension of the Deerfield Code was to come up with a whole bunch of new use provisions, a whole bunch of new standards that would be completely incompatible with what was used on the area to the south. Because again, we'd like the code to be as general, as user-friendly, and as consistent as possible. So the first thing that we did was we saw very early on in the visioning plan that no building in this area should be more than 2 stories in height. So essentially, we had a current 2-story building height zone that was south of Bethany Bend, essentially between where Deerfield comes in and the northern end. We took that and we extended it all the way north to the Forsyth County border. So that addresses one of the concerns. The other thing we did, however, was we saw that there was a desire to have a residential character for all of the development, essentially what we have called T4 in other parts of the code, but that the use provisions were a little bit different. In this particular area, they wanted something that was between purely residential and purely commercial. So as you may recall, the Deerfield Code had T4 regular, which is a residential district, and it had T4 open, which is a truly commercial district. What we ended up doing was to create something in between that we call T4 permissive, for lack of a better term. And if you have a recommendation for a different term, I'll certainly use it. But essentially what this is it takes out all of those particular commercial uses that would otherwise occur in T4 open that were deemed inappropriate in this Northern Corridor study. And so I'll talk about what some of those are in a moment, but generally speaking, they're more auto-oriented land uses. So this new district, T4 permissive, has the identical form to T4, meaning essentially it is a 2-story building with some setbacks, with more landscaping. But again, it does allow specific commercial uses. It actually does restrict specific commercial uses that were deemed inappropriate in this area. In addition, however, we've also created a very tiny sub-area right up here at 5 Acre Road, where there are, I believe, 5 parcels where the visioning study wanted even further restrictions. So I created what I called the 5 Acre Road Zone. Not necessarily the most original term, but it speaks to what it is. In that particular area, there are additional commercial restrictions. For example, you cannot do more. You have even fewer commercial rights that you can do in terms of offices and drive-throughs, et cetera. Also in this area, the community plan talked about further limiting density to, I believe, 1 to 10,000 square feet per acre. So in this particular 5 Acre Road area, the code talks about limiting those uses, limiting the density further, and incorporate some specific landscaping requirements. There was a desire for a 20-foot landscape buffer on the side streets. And so what we did is we put all of those unique things in this one little sub-area, one little overlay identified on the map. So in addition, in Deerfield, there were some specific uses that had proven to be problematic, not necessarily in the Highway 9 North area, but in Deerfield in general. One of those was radio stations and radio and television stations, where there was a lack of standards for how any utilities on the property, any satellites, et cetera, need to be screened. And so we created standards in this code talking about screening to make sure that if you do have one of those facilities and you do these accessory technical items associated with them, that they have screening. Another area where we incorporated some additional standards Deerfield-wide regard the issue of large format retailers or big box. You may know that the City of Milton has citywide standards for those kind of uses. We have incorporated them by reference However, we have created specific language that says if something is otherwise contrary to that in the Deerfield Code, the Deerfield Code supersedes. What might examples be? Well, parking, for example, is actually prohibited in some areas of the Deerfield Code and in certain distance from the street. And so we wanted to be very clear that even though we're incorporating those citywide standards, there are some cases of where Deerfield may conflict, and in that case, what is in Deerfield prevails. And so, in a nutshell, those really are all of the format, or are all of the content changes of these codes. Now, as you've gone through the copy, you've probably seen that there have been a few other changes. There were some definitions that we decided could be better worded or could be better, could be clarified in terms of what they mean. But in terms of the actual content and policy changes, it really is fairly modest. And I think that in terms of usability, that these changes will make the code much, much, much more usable, and will also move forward with achieving the vision of the State Route 9 North Plan. So with that said, I would love to answer any questions that you may have. Great.
And if you want to sit at the table as
That would be
well,
great.
that's great. Okay, questions? Paul, why don't you start? 'Cause I know you've got some.
Actually, I don't right now, yeah, there's some things I'm gonna go back that I know earlier.
Okay, all right, put you on the spot.
Thank you, though, for the opportunity.
Anyone else? Clarification or further information?
Yeah, since I represent the non-North area, so we're talking about thoroughfares. Explain that, still not.
So essentially what a thoroughfare is a street, a new street that would be platted with development. And so what was happening is the previous code said the way a developer can determine what street they build is they first determine what curb-to-curb width they want. It says you can do anything from, a very narrow giveaway street to a very wide street. It then says you also look at what kind of sidewalk you want. So when you have the curb to curb to the sidewalk, you get what is called your thoroughfare. Now the problem there is that developers were doing the minimum. So they were doing very narrow, staff coercion notwithstanding. They wanted to do their very minimum. Fortunately, the city is going to be accepting the streets, and the city does have some control. But Carter had asked us to create a whole new series of cross-sections that would supplant that flexibility and would be consistent with their engineering best practices as well as in the subdivision board does. So we essentially defined those, and I believe those are in table, I want to say it's table 4.
And it also meets the fire code as well, with the fire trucks, which is another big concern we have. It could be that narrow that it allow for the trucks to go by and short radiuses.
And there's, just on the general, on intent, the comment, says item D, development patterns should support future premium transit facilities along Georgia Park.
Well, Mario does have a plan to bring transit up to Windward. And so, we've always looked at Deerfield, the main Deerfield area as having more density because it can be supported by a transit station. Now, whether that ever happens in our lifetime. I've personally been involved in 4 planning studies for Martin to bring it up, but someday we will have transit, I believe, and we already do have that parking lot, for buses, so
I thought that was Windward on the other side, Alpharetta was looking at that.
right, but that will serve as well through shuttle buses.
And Just to be clear, the changes are in red. So if anything's in black today, it actually is in the current code.
Let me ask a question, like thoroughfare, part, I'm looking to see where I read it. I thought I read that one of the text or table, the thoroughfares may include bikeways, not shall.
They may, yes, it is not a requirement.
And is that something that the city would consider? I think you can think about this being a little like community as well. If we're identifying some to be maybe more major thoroughfares than others, primary thoroughfares, we probably should contemplate biking, pedestrian communities that are interacting with the
Now,
vehicles.
the only part of the code where they are required, because they are required to plan, is in Crabapple.
Right.
In Crabapple, there's a regulating plan that essentially says these roadways, when they are built, must have a multi-use trail on the side. So those have been mapped. In Deerfield, there weren't actually any of those kind of streets mapped in the Deerfield LCI or in the Highway 9 conditioning plan. So we didn't actually require them in the text.
Think about the connectivity, the potential connectivity of Deerfield to some of the greenway things that are out there. If we're introducing, some more residential concepts that may include an active lifestyle community, we may very well want to identify certain thoroughfares that would, and must, rather than shall or may.
Because there's a lot of biking activity on Bethany Bend, particularly on the east side of Bethany Bend, going up into Forsyth. Yeah.
It's not that it has to be everywhere, it just needs to be on identified primary thoroughfares where you can then expect a biking community to take advantage of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's three major biking routes.
Yeah.
Actually for that bike all around Melton and over, up to Cherokee. And they use, Deerfield is used quite a bit to get in and out. Lifetime Fitness takes Deerfield up, off to Union, out Forsyth, and then over to Cherokee. Also from Forsyth down Highway 9, very much used, and down to Bethany up the backside. So there's no bike lanes in really any of them.
Yeah.
This is very
Yes,
dangerous without them.
particularly Bethany Bend is.
So, and there's a ton of runners as well that run, and we have no completed sidewalk from Crooked Creek down till we hit Bethany. So you have people running on really bad areas, and that really needs to be finished. Regardless of development, it should just be done.
I think a lot of that will be addressed, things like Highway 9 is the improvements for Highway 9, the widening, that will include a bike lane as well as, I know that's down the line.
We can't wait for the
Well, I'm just
sidewalk.
saying that that's.
The sidewalk should have been done years ago. I mean, really, speaking on behalf of the community, frankly, there's no excuse why that can't be done. I really gotta say that.
Actually, I made a misspoke. I've not actually looked at the Deerfield regulating plan in a while. If you go to the map, which Mr. Gentleman have open, there is a requirement that says if there is a greenway trail, which is a bicycle facility shown on that map, it is a requirement. So that would pick up the north side of Webb Road. It would pick up sort of mid-block between some of the parks. It would pick up this side of Deerfield Parkway. It would also pick up a portion of McGinnis Ferry Road. And even long-term, this idea of a multi-use trail on Georgia 400. So those are in practice.
But not Highway 9.
No.
But I mean, anytime there's improvements on Highway 9, they're required to do a section that does include a bicycle lane. I didn't see even the Target, that was, I don't know if it's part of the improvement.
I would think, yeah, the GDOT developers they're doing should include, we'll check on that part. to make sure, you know.
There is a, I think this is a very good point. There is in Alpharetta, there's what's called Division Main Street. sense to think about extending that north. That's a city policy decision, but we could, now would be the time to put it in the code.
Makes sense.
And we'll check with DDOT, because if it isn't in there, if we make it a part of the policy, then that's something that, you know, the couples, we'll redevelop.
Would there be concern about extending that all the way up State Route 9 to the county line?
I think that's what she's saying. Yeah, it really should be to the county line, because there is quite a bit of use, and, you know, folks connecting from other areas, riding into our area as well as us riding into their area, so.
We can add it in, you know, it's got it through the process. I think that's very appropriate.
And then I'll go back to Alpharetta City Center, and then we'll go back up here.
That's right.
There's more of that than we care to admit at this point. I mean, that's just, the good fortune of not having accidents that have made the news. The news takers on those. And as we talked about, there are large cycling groups, they can spread out for a mile or two or three from time to time when they are on some of the more rural areas of these groups to drive. So we need to make sure we plan for their safety now.
They take up all,
They're on the whole thing. No, but, you know, they have nowhere to go right now except for the road.
Yeah, but they're not supposed to be taking up all the road.
There's a lot of us who, there are those who don't.
One of the things that I'd like to see that is community-wide versus just these corridors is, it's amazing to me that we build these subdivisions and the sidewalks just stop instead of going to something that is meaningful to the next intersection or whatever. And, we just filled our roundabouts and soon we'll be building more and just how they just could stop.
The sidewalk, the roundabout.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I understand the purpose of putting it there, but I just want to walk back and forth.
To build or just doing it.
Well, and that's the thing, I think that when we do these type developments, trying to get to a meaningful next place, because we've got to get sidewalks built between the subdivisions somehow. And I understand it's right away and those kinds of things.
Well, we do have a sidewalk fund, and for that purpose, to start to build the connections between what we call the sidewalks to nowhere.
Where are we getting that from, is what, is my question.
It comes from the developers, it's just like our tree fund. If, sidewalks already there, or other circumstances, sidewalks have to be built or something, or they can pay into a fund rather than building that sidewalk, and then we use that to make connections.
Yeah, it would be of questionable constitutionality if we required developers to make significant off-site sidewalk improvements. You can make them do it in front of their property, but.
Well, I'm thinking about impact fees that we
Well,
collect in a different way.
exactly, not a zoning issue.
So,
And usually those gaps are like the state lots where they have a house on 5 acres or 3 acres, and the county at the time, we do require them to do sidewalks, but they probably said, please, 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 I don't want to do it, and they contributed to the sidewalk, their sidewalk fund. So there's a lot of gaps. Or like I think about the 5-acre lots, that was done so many years ago, and they probably said, oh, nobody needs a sidewalk up here. It's the same scenario, but 20 years later, yeah, you really do need a sidewalk. So yeah, we do. Yeah, and a lot of people that do walk, do run, do bike, the Cambridge and the kids.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a new. Yeah.
And it's a change of lifestyle.
my wife complains every single day about walking from our house to the middle, to do her walk. Now the kids just back, it's right over on Freemanville, there's nowhere to walk.
So what do we need to do then to ensure that we can have the funds? I mean, are we not charging builders enough to do it? I came from Denver, and I can tell you, a builder can't build a darn thing in Colorado unless infrastructure's built. I mean, this is something I'm actually taking up with our representatives, builder and a good citizen in this city, I think you gotta pay the price to be part of that community. And part of what we're saying we want as a community is we want the sidewalks, the walkability, the biking, the connectedness. But yet, we're still allowing builders to go do something different, and that doesn't make sense to me personally.
I would start that conversation clear with us with Carter. He administers that. We do have a source of grant money that we do get sidewalk funds for. We're building, for instance, sidewalks on Mayfield from the main intersection down to the library on both sides of the street. So we do get grant monies for that from time to time. So, but he has the whole list of grant sources and what it looks like in terms of future grant monies coming in, and also how he administers the sidewalk roadmap.
I just think of it this way, in people who live in the city too, I think people are willing to, if the developers are willing, I bet taxpayers are willing to get sidewalks by putting in a rule as well. So,
Sure, and a lot of
if
cities
that's
have
the
that
community that I want,
That's right, exactly.
And I think he has a project list, and there's priorities, and they evaluate the highest priorities and all that. So it's not just a mission, there's a science behind it.
Right, and kids walking to school, that was our top priority. So there is a list of, I think that's a separate conversation, part of it. But anyone have any other questions or comments or additions?
I do have, when I was going back over this table, I realized that, I think it's the same with Old Apple and Deerfield, that under Veterans Hospital kennel with inside pens, we have it as warrant, but I think it really needs to be a right now. It's permitted by right for internal.
Well, warrant is by right, essentially. I mean, what a warrant is essentially says before you get a use permit, you have to, Kathy has to sign off that it's consistent with code. So it doesn't actually require a public hearing. The reason is to essentially make sure that what you're talking about is being complied with, that they're not actually secretly putting something in there. If we wanted to make it by right, we could. And is it not?
Well, it's all, you can see by architecture that there's, if they're outdoor, then they're already out.
Well, a warrant is a letter.
Okay.
Based on our meeting and review. So I don't have any problem at all doing that. I always err on the side of more review than less reviews. And it just gives me a chance on a case-by-case basis. And, you want to make sure that it's not so large, that it's not so close to the house. There are a lot of different issues when you're dealing with animals. So I would think, I would just agree with that.
Describe the warrant again, so what?
It's an administrative variance. Rather than going to the BZA, which involves advertisement and a public hearing, it just says that and there are certain conditions under which I can do the warrant. But it's just administratively, they come in and make a resignation, and I have the ability to sign off on it. And it's usually for minor things that, but it at least allows me to have a case-by-case review, rather than just having black and white, BZA and by right, sort of.
So, for instance, a warrant for a use, it says in the code, like the Deerfield 11514, warrants relating to a use shall be based upon considerations for use permits established in 64. There's different considerations when you consider a use permit, like in the public hearing. So Kathy would look at those things. So that's as far as that deals with the use versus, do I have to do, the 10-foot setback and then do a 5-foot? That's a different type of warrant that goes by the variance standards. And it speaks to that as well.
Basically, what we did is we identified those uses that had the most potential, that were allowed by right in the previous zoning, but had the most potential to have unforeseen negative impacts. And we said areas. I think I could launch car wash, check cashing, that those uses that have the most potential to have externalities at least have one additional layer of review to make sure that they're in conformance with the provisions of the code.
Historically, where would those have been?
They were by right.
Well, pawn shop, didn't they ban those?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is check cashing.
Check
Yeah.
cashing.
I see pawn shops by
Well,
water.
actually, no, it's pawn shops are permitted. It was under a C2.
Okay.
So that's kind of more different, yeah, under the traditional zoning. What it is that it was massage parlors that are not permitted anymore. So we have like one massage parlor.
Where is that?
I mean, it's the one across from Clean Parts. It's on the second story. So, I mean, it's not a massage. I mean, they call it a spa. It's a day spa. We do recommend, yeah, they have a lot of problems. But we do allow massage therapy or whatever to be allowed with like a chiropractor, with a physical therapy, or with like a salon that is a legit salon where they have hair and they have other kind of services.
So we do not allow the
Standalone.
Korean massage parlor.
Right.
Correct.
Easy to enforce that.
So this warrant,
All you gotta do is go to the
is what we currently have in place.
we call it our employees.
Right, it's
Well,
translating it from the traditional code, and that's why we changed it from the form-based code.
And it basically means they couldn't go and apply for a
Got it.
business license, and they're potentially challenging use. Before their business license can be issued, it has to go to Kathy. She makes sure that they're not doing anything that is inconsistent with the code, writes a letter, and they're good to go.
Makes sense.
The question on TDRs.
I'm gonna make you answer this.
Yes. Yeah, definitely some concerns around, a couple of things in here around density and, taking an open area and putting it over Highway 9 area. That's a little problematic for me.
We don't have any receiving sites in the new area.
Yeah, that's correct. The north area does not allow additional density.
Right, because there's not enough zoning there. You know, they're only 2 stories, so there's not, it's all by right.
But even so, in the Highway 9 area, I mean, I think we have to be careful with that, because our objective in that whole area is to clean up the mess that Fulton County left. I mean, we don't like any of it. I mean, anyone who's in that corridor, it was awful. I mean, we never got a chance, we had plenty of chances, they never listened to us when we went down many, many times to Fulton County. They just built it because they wanted the tax revenue. So frankly, as these properties turn over, we can see very different development. Very similar to what we allowed for the memory care facility, that type of.
Well, yeah, the perfect.
That's
That's,
what-
you actually cited the perfect example, because we have 2 memory care facilities, one of which is further north, Route 9, right, then one at the intersection of Webb Road. And that would not have been built without a TDR transaction, which is about to happen at the end of this month. So that TDR actually helped put that facility in and help develop that site that everyone has done. So there was a good side to it.
Right,
And,
that's a good side.
And I
That's
know.
gonna be a nice,
Yes,
very nice.
and that's right. We really gave, fair amount of zoning to these places, but sometimes with the TDR added, the actual density, that helps to redevelop the site. And I saw that in Roswell on Alpharetta Highway, all those little small properties, much of which you see up here. And we could never get it redeveloped because you didn't have enough density put on it to convince the owner, because it's kind of cash cow concern from a rental perspective. For him to want
box, and the thought is to extend where Starbucks is and make that a very nice looking two-story storefront, then you don't see what's behind there.
Right,
And,
right.
you know, it looks more appealing. So actually, that particular area wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, we're giving them enough density by what they've done by right and what they can buy, plus all the constraints of the form-based code in terms of what it can look like, and height, there's still a height restriction, you know, regardless, there's still a height restriction, so we have pretty much boxed them in, but we've given them all the tools that developer needs to accomplish exactly what you're objectives.
So instead of, you know, because I saw one area, you know, talking about, you know, creating additional density, and it sounded more on, you know, what I would want to see is, granted, there's not a lot of property left, but there is still a little bit over in Deerfield, and there was some talk around, you know, whole shopping, retail, to not make it more dense.
Yeah, the challenge with Deerfield, this project is it was zoned under the county. And so what we had to do to avoid accusations of significant downzoning, we essentially had to convert their permitted rights. And some of these are zoned for hundreds of thousands of square feet of office and retail. We had to convert
Mostly
that.
office. Which I think is, I mean, the office and retail people were okay with that, but the apartments did not want it.
And that's why it's a use permit, is
Right.
Deerfield. Right. And that's why we're being sued next door, because the city council turned it down.
Yeah, and, because I think people want revenue areas, and
Right.
everybody's
That's right.
for,
This
let's.
land is too valuable for
Exactly. I don't think you'll get a concern there. I think the concern though is, we don't just want to stick a bunch of apartments that don't produce as much revenue.
Right.
It needs to be more where you've got retail revenue generation.
And in Deerfield, there is actually a provision that you cannot do a freestanding apartment building. You must have commercial in it. That's
50%.
50%.
It's already in there.
So that's already in there, and that's, I think, probably why you're being sued, right?
Right. Because they didn't want any mixed use, they just wanted to do apartments. Yeah. And the city council said no.
Okay, so that clears up my, you know, issue of, if we're gonna use it that way, people will be all for that.
We're in the business of making people happy.
I'll keep on saying I have to come.
My wife is not sure. Our taxpayers.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Caleb? You won't see Caleb at the next, either one of your meetings, so this is now your opportunity.
I have one on page 28, it's in 4.15, radio and television station standards, under 4.15.3, we're talking about particular heights. It says accessory telecommunication structures must be screened from view along a public or private street. Or residential use by minimum 8 feet high, 100% opaque wall, solid appearance, or visually continuous opaque evergreen edge. There's a minimum of 5 feet high, planned image can be expected to be 8 feet high within 2 years of planting. I mean, is there a standard of what we're expecting a television or radio station to have in terms of equipment? So we know that 8 feet is going to accommodate.
8 feet potentially could not entirely screen it, but the idea is a street level. If people driving by or walking by, they won't be able to see it. I mean, if the desire was to screen it for its entire height, that can be very challenging. Satellites can be 15, 20, 25 feet high.
And is there, do we know enough about that industry to know that they can get by with something, you know, say 20-foot dish, not appropriated for Deerfield, but your 12-foot dish that could be screened, you know, by 80% with an 8-foot high screen is appropriate to us. Do we know enough about that industry?
I don't. That may be a question for the attorney, if that can be done legally in terms of limiting the height of the actual telecommunication device.
How about if we just took that use out?
Is there a reason that it's in?
Yeah.
Well, I think because it was a permitted use already.
Oh.
I mean, at least by use, I mean, I have to look at the code to see. I mean, we just didn't get it out of the air. It was something that.
And it's not permitted
there.
in Crabapple.
The Comcast thing is they're south of Alpharetta or in Alpharetta. That's the kind of use you're talking about.
They don't usually come with one or two.
Yeah, they usually, they have a farm of them.
Yeah, right,
Because
right.
they're
Large.
directed in different satellites.
What's that allowed in T what? Is it, you said T?
Let's see here, in their office, it is permitted by warrant, and because there are specific issues Kathy needs to look at in all of the commercial areas, so T5, T6, T4 open. It cannot occur in any of the residential areas. They're protected by other provisions in the code, so.
It's under chapter 4, so they have to.
Yeah, and if you look down here, telecommunications, it actually, there's actually no access.
Yeah. I think we should put it in all of them. He gets his bonuses for that. Yeah. Yeah, we're good. Right?
This is not.
Well, can we make it a use permit as opposed to just a warrant?
I think I was kind of going with that. I mean, that's kind of, where you can kind of judge it. If we want a 12-foot dish, we can say, oh, that would be fine. If you want a 20-foot dish, I don't think, you know what I mean? We can.
Because it has so much potential impact.
Yeah, especially the T4 open kind of area.
Right.
Or, I mean, if you're across from 5 acres, I mean, that wouldn't be there. That wouldn't be there. We're messing around. Yeah.
I think a use permit works. I mean,
Yeah.
That kind of takes care of that.
I think it's better than a warrant. I mean, I'm happy to review it, but I think that it's much more impactful in this public hearing.
And I would suggest on there too, that since you're working in some of these industries, I work in the tech industries, that you also want to look at the newer technologies that they're coming out with, they're less invasive.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I'm hoping all this just goes away someday.
I mean, the last thing you would want to do is prohibit them and you have someone who came in and wanted to do a really cool, like, sports broadcast center that, you know, or like Good Morning America and this big mixed use project, and that would be probably desirable.
Right, and
So
the
use
taxpayers
permit.
would be highly, the tax would be highly desirable too.
Okay, so we'll change it to.
So let's do a use, and now we, permit. Anything else?
what are, what you refer to infill regulating plan requirements, what do you mean?
So basically what that means, and it's in here for a reason, is this code essentially lays out streets, greenways, etc. What an infill regulating plan is essentially a type of rezoning. It says that if you have a big enough property, you can apply for a different transect zone, a different street network, a different greenway trail network. And actually, that language is used in several other codes that I've written. And I'll give you an example because it was approved last night. General Motors in Doraville. That is under a form-based code very similar to this. And so that is a 140-acre property. And the LCI laid out streets and parks, etc., but without an actual real developer. So that was done 5 years ago. So last night, the city of Doraville essentially approved an infill regulating plan in which the developer said, okay, these are the transect zones we want on the GM site, these are the areas where we want our civic spaces, these are the areas where we want our street to match their actual development program. So that's all it is, it's a type of rezoning.
Although you can't do an infill for something that's not permitted.
That's correct.
So like, we've had somebody come and say, we're gonna do X or Y. It's like, well, but it's not a permitted use, it's not permitted. Like, people try to get higher zoning or density, it's like, well, I'm sorry, you can't get more than whatever.
It's a way to essentially change that map, that regulated plan map, but do it within the design framework of the form-based code.
So that sounds like it would apply to when some of these areas get resold, you folks who buy the property.
But practically speaking, there's so much flexibility in this code that no one needs it. And someone will come in and say, oh, maybe I should do it or rezone it. We say, why bother? You've got everything you need right in here.
the only possible case where you can need it, the only
It was
possible.
a dirty word. We're a friendly bunch of people. We say no a lot, but we're very friendly when we say it.
If at some point in the future, any of these apartment complexes on Deerfield Parkway went downhill, and someone wanted to buy them, and they wanted to do something like have them on there, they would need an infill regulating plan, because those properties are not zoned for commercial, they're not zoned for mixed use, they're only zoned for apartments. This would let them do something like that within the parameter of the code.
They still need to come through though for designs.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, all the designs still stay.
Okay, got it.
Nitty-gritty level. I don't know where it is, but it's something you talked about in the presentation. Forgot the term that you used, but the stub roads that are not finished. Have you seen any communities that require some level of finish to that stub road in anticipation of it being extended, but for the duration that it's not? It's not just, a rough edge comes to, to abrupt finish, and it's garbage can, or it's a post, or it's something like that. So,
I have. What I have seen, and I'm not sure whether the city's required to develop a bond or how it works, but in the city of Woodstock, they have some requirements, and there have been cases where the stub roads are treated as parks interim, basically grass areas, dog parks. They're public rights of way, they go up to the property line, the houses face on them. Because of fire code, they do have to be reinforced, and they have their 20-foot clear zone, but they're not actually paved roadways. It's like I've seen that. I don't know if the city mandates a bond so that when the adjacent property redevelops, they can connect. But that's the only way that I've seen it. Usually, the standard condition is you just build the road to the end of the property.
So everybody knows what they get,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
That's the other thing. People tend to think it's
Their property.
a dog park forever, I would imagine.
Right, and we've seen that, we've
Right.
seen. So, yeah, we like to, pave it right up there, so it's well
I'm all for the
defined.
paving, you're right up to the point where it's appropriate to stop it, but then when it's stopped, there's no finish to it. They pour the concrete, it's not a finished floor. It's just however it spills out at the end, it could be there's no finished curb that goes, that continues. There's no landscaping requirement. It could just be, fill dirt and add rock in it. It becomes a very unsightly area until such a point in time that it is developed. Could we contemplate something that requires them to finish it to a certain landscape standard?
Yeah, I'm not sure the
Well,
one,
you can, because then once it ends, it's somebody else's property, so you can't go on somebody else's property. I mean, I get about having it properly finished and correct, definitely that should be part of
yeah.
the inspection at the end, that it's not just falling apart at the end.
Well, maybe let me do that, because I think we should be doing that. If we're not doing it, then we should.
It sounds like what he's saying is rather than take it all the way to the end, maybe have a slight buffer.
Well, that's one of the things to consider. You've got a buffer probably on the other side from the abutting property.
Yeah.
But then you would have to finish out that buffer on continuation, would be the question.
The question really comes down to is if the city is taking possession of when subdivision turnover of that parcel that goes up to it. That's point one. Point two is the fire department, and the fire department being able to utilize it. Point three is going to be that when a developer signs off, he goes and turns over his roads to either the homeowners association or to the city. Those fit and finished things would have been dealt with at that point in time, or should be.
Maybe it's done with the bond. That's part of the sign-off, is there's a bond.
But a lot of the places we have problems with people going bankrupt and just walking away. And so therefore, then the city doesn't finish it. Homeowner sections up, because they didn't finish. And unfortunately, for most of them, they have bigger sets of problems like halfway built houses and like sand.
Well, I think it deserves light of day. I don't know if we can
Yeah,
solve it.
but we'll find out about that, because I think it should already be in there. You're right, so we'll already.
Well, there is to a certain extent, like, especially say between phases of a subdivision, we require them to thing is when you get up to a property line, you just may not have room.
Right.
So,
So the 150-foot provision that is in here now isn't arbitrary. That's actually the standard coast length of a fire truck. So if the fire truck was concerned about driving up down that dead street, they would, you're right, would be able to at least access the front of the house.
Do they require the fire truck to be able to be turned around and do that?
No, I don't believe so.
Probably not. It's
Not as a stub. As a permanent, absolutely. Absolutely. they would.
But we need to address this more than just in the form-based code.
Yeah, it's the citywide
It's
issue.
the citywide issue. So it needs to be our subdivision regs, so we need to go back and address that. I think, let's take that as a separate issue, we'll get back to it, but that's a good question. And, but it's over the whole city, it's just not.
On the other part of that, so just what about where you got a curb cut and it just, there's nothing, I mean, the builder may have requested a curb cut, it's gone in, but then there's nothing.
That's just the way, that's for future development.
Yeah, but there's a lot of those, I mean, just sitting around where, like Marty said, builder went belly up, and it just,
Well, the reality is, it comes down to the final inspection of turning over from the developer slash builder, whoever, to HOA or the city. And there's a limited number of people to do those inspections, unfortunately. And sometimes they just get through.
I mean, if it needs to be a certain way, our inspectors are going to make sure before they sign off on it. So we just have to see what that regulation is.
I mean, no, inspectors.
Depends on what type. We only have one development inspector that inspects all subdivision, like streets, soil roll tests, and then they check for soil erosion during construction. There's, Mark can help out with that bill. And then we have building inspectors. Only one development inspector. But okay, other questions? Question on the 5-acre road area, on 3.4.10 on page 15. It says no sidewalk is required in public frontage.
Yes.
That's a problem. Well, that's what it does.
No, only on a 5-acre road.
Yeah, just on
There-
the street. And that's side
Oh,
street.
on their street.
Right, yes.
It would be required, yeah, public frontage.
Yeah, within theirs, that makes sense.
You'll have to do it on 9. You won't have to do it on
They
5.
requested that.
Yeah, and I understand why, because they're very large acres,
Right.
it's more rural place. Yeah.
I said, it would almost look out of place.
It would look weird, yes, it really, right.
Anything else? Dave, feel an easy time?
We're gonna give you a hard time when he's unavailable.
They're teeing up for